Do you want to better understand one of the shortest yet most influential papers in all of philosophy? Then keep watching. Hey philosophical lifer, it's Christopher. By the end of this episode of Thought Lab, you'll have a deeper understanding of Edmund Gettier's paper, Is Knowledge Justified True Belief? You'll understand how those two cases test the very nature of knowledge. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Philosophical Life. This is a place where we break down arguments and build up minds. Then consider subscribing to this channel by clicking the subscribe button down below and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. Now let's get this thought party started. So we're taking a look at Edmund Gettier's famous paper, Is Knowledge Justified True Belief? Specifically, we're looking at two cases that he mentioned in that paper that demolished the old school account of knowledge. So as you can see here in the slide, that's a picture of Edmund Gettier. What is the old school account of knowledge? Well, the old school account of knowledge is something that traces back to at least Plato. And Gettier noted that there are basically three parts to the old school account of knowledge. Part one, a subject, S. Philosophers love little abbreviations for terms. So S stands for a subject or a person. Knows that P, where P stands for some proposition, if and only if the following conditions hold. There are three conditions. Number one, the proposition is true. Number two, the subject believes the proposition. And three, the subject is justified in believing the proposition. Now, this account of knowledge you'll often hear referred to as the JTB account of knowledge, justified true belief. If you have all three of those ingredients, then basically you have what you need in order to get knowledge. Now, let's think about how this works by looking at what it takes to bake a cake. So you can imagine that you're trying to bake a cake and you have, say, flour, sugar, and eggs. And the claim would be that sugar, flour, and eggs are individually necessary. You have to have all the ingredients to get a cake, and they're jointly sufficient. So if you have all three of those ingredients, then those are the only ingredients you need in order to have a cake. But there's a problem. You might be missing something. That is, it would be problematic if you put all those ingredients in and you didn't get a cake. You would show that those conditions together are insufficient to getting a cake. What might you be missing? Well, you might be missing like a fourth ingredient, like butter. Butter's a big one in cakes. So that's what's going on with Gettier's paper. He's going to look at the JTB account of knowledge and say, look, you can have all three of those things in place, but you aren't going to get knowledge. Just like you can have all three of those things in place for baking a cake, but you may not get a cake because you're missing a key ingredient. That's what he's going to argue. So, as it says on the slide here, basically the JTB account of knowledge is demolished. It's destroyed if we have those conditions that are individually necessary and jointly sufficient for knowledge, and yet they aren't enough. We don't have knowledge. So, there are two cases that Gettier raises. The first case, as you can see here, is given by a picture of coins, and we'll call it coins for short. And the second picture of here is someone in Barcelona, and the second case we'll refer to as Barcelona. Let's really dive in and break these cases down. First case, coins, has the following scenario built into it. We're to imagine two guys are going for a job. They're both interviewing for the same job. Their names are Smith and Jones. So now we're to suppose that they both applied for the same job, and we're to suppose that Smith has strong evidence for the following conjunctive proposition. Jones is the man who will get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Now you might wonder, how in the heck does Smith have evidence for the fact that Jones is going to get the job and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket? Well, let's take a look at how he gets that evidence according to Gettier. Smith's evidence for proposition A, that conjunctive proposition, might be that the president of the company assured him that Jones would in the end be selected. Isn't that horrible? You can imagine that Smith is hanging out there and he sees the president of the company come by and he's going to schmooze him maybe because he's about to go in for the interview. He's waiting. Hi, President. Good to see you. And what does the president do? The president says, maybe just to soften the blow, hey, look, Jones is going to actually be the one that gets the job. We really appreciate you coming in. You're both well qualified, but it's looking like Jones is going to be the one who'll get the job. Brutal, right? Be deflated if you hadn't even gone in for the interview yet and you had heard that. And here's the weird thing. The other part of the conjunctive premise, for some reason, Smith had counted the coins in Jones' pockets 10 minutes ago. So you can imagine they're both in the waiting room. Jones pulls out his change, hands it to him, says, do you mind counting these coins or count them up? He counts the coins, there are 10 coins, and he hands them back to him, and he watches Jones put them in his pocket. So that means that Smith has good evidence for the fact that Jones is going to get the job and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Now let's go ahead and see what this entails. Now, Smith is a logical person. He kind of derives something from that conjunctive proposition A, and namely proposition B. The man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. So he just sort of generalizes on those facts about Jones. Now let's suppose, as it says, that Smith sees the entailment from A to B and accepts B, this is a key, accepts B on the grounds of A. So A becomes the reason why Smith believes B. He believes it on the basis of A, for which he has good evidence for. Now, what that means is you have kind of a transfer of the evidential basis, or the thing that provides support for the proposition. So in this case, Smith is clearly justified in believing that B is true. After all, B is just a generalization of A, which he had really good evidence for. So he has good evidence for B as well, and he's justified in believing B. Now, here's the twist. Dun, 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 dun. Imagine further, this is where the Gettier Case gets its name, the twist, that is, that unknown to Smith, he himself, not Jones, will get the job. So the president might have gotten overridden in the final decision making. And actually Smith, in the end, is going to get the job, not Jones. And also, here's the second part of the twist, unknown to Smith, he himself has 10 coins in his pocket. We can imagine Smith was nervous, went to the vending machine, put in some change, got some coins back, started eating maybe a candy bar or something like that. And as chance would have it, he just ended up with 10 coins in his pocket. So what does this mean? Well, this means that proposition B is then true. The man who'll get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Though proposition A, from which Smith inferred B, is false. That is, remember, it said that Jones is the one who's going to get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, this is important. When it comes to logic, a conjunctive proposition or a conjunction, both parts of the conjunction have to be true for the whole conjunction to be true. Now we have, with A, we still have that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. We can just grant that. But the thing that makes the whole thing false is the fact that actually Jones is not going to get the job. And remember, as it says there, in A, Jones is the man who will get the job. So that part is false. That makes the whole A false. But here's the key. Remember, he derived his evidence from A and sort of believe B on the basis of A. Now what happened is he's actually still justified in believing B. He still has good evidence for B, namely that the man who'll get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay, so here it is. What we have with regard to proposition B is it's true. It's true that the man who gets the job will have 10 coins in his pocket, namely Smith. Smith believes that B is true. He believes B. And here's the third part. He is justified in believing that B is true because he has strong evidence for it. But it's equally clear that Smith doesn't know that B is true. Remember the twist. He doesn't know he has 10 coins in his pocket, and he doesn't know that he's going to actually be the one that gets the job. So we have a justified true belief without knowledge. We have the three ingredients that are supposedly sufficient to give us knowledge, but we don't have knowledge. So why no knowledge? For B is true, as it says, in virtue of the number of coins in Smith's pocket, while Smith doesn't know how many coins are in Smith's pocket and bases his belief in B on account of the coins in Jones's pocket, whom he falsely believes to be the man who'll get the job. So he has a justified true belief with regard to B, but he doesn't know B. Now, to break things down further, because this thought lab, we're really breaking down the case, we're going to go ahead and make proposition C. So proposition C is Smith will get the job, and Smith himself has 10 coins in his pocket. So we're just made more explicit the proposition that constituted the twist. Namely, and Smith doesn't know C, but C is in fact true. So why this is important is now we can see, if you check out this diagram, we can see what happens in Gettier cases and why they count against the justified true belief account of knowledge. What we have, as you can see here, is the justified true belief B in the center. The man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Then we have what makes that belief true in that proposition B true, and what justifies it come apart. They're not connected. So what makes it true that B is the case, that the man who'll get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, is proposition C, which is unknown to Smith. Namely, Smith will get the job and he himself has 10 coins in his pocket. But that truth maker, proposition C, is separate from the justifier. That is proposition A, from which he gets his justification for B. Namely, Jones is the man who'll get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. So we have the justification and truth channels for the proposition have sort of come apart. And that's what results in this separation that leads to a justified true belief, but no knowledge. Now let's jump into the second case. It's going to have a lot of similar features, but it's going to have some interesting twists. So we're to imagine the following scenario. Smith, again, we're dealing with Smith again, has strong evidence for the following proposition. A, Jones owns a Ford. So let's say they work at the same place and, Jones actually just shows up in his Ford all the time. So Smith has this evidence that Jones owns a Ford. Now, it could be rented, but let's say actually that Jones actually showed Smith like the registration, that it's registered to him, that he owns the car outright. So let's just imagine Smith has really strong evidence that Jones owns a Ford. Now let's imagine that Smith has another friend, Brown, of whose whereabouts he's totally ignorant. He has no clue where Brown is. But Smith is sort of strange, but Smith decides to do it. He selects 3 place names quite at random and constructs the following 3 propositions. Remember, Smith is pretty logical. So we have B, either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Boston. C, either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona. And then D, either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Brest-Litovsk. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. But we have the following 3 propositions. Okay, now let's imagine that Smith realizes the entailments of these propositions, B, C, and D, and he is constructed by A and proceeds to accept them on the basis of A. Now, imagine that he inferred B, C, and D from a proposition for which he has strong evidence. That is, he inferred all of the 3 propositions that includes the fact about Jones owning a Ford, and then this extension where the other part of the or statement is about Brown and that he's somewhere in the world. And so he has strong evidence for the 3 propositions because he has strong evidence for part of the or statement, namely that Jones owns a Ford, and that's proposition A. So that means he's got strong evidence and is justified in believing B, C, and D. Okay, remember, we get a twist in Gettier Cases. Here's the twist. First, Jones does not own a Ford. So he's just driving a rented car, and I have no clue why he forged or sort of faked a registration. Maybe he just wants to seem like he owns things when really he just rented that car. I also don't know why he drove it every day, so that's sort of strange. But either way, it turns out that Jones actually doesn't own the Ford. And secondly, here's the second part of the twist. By the sheerest coincidence, this is why the case is called Barcelona, and entirely unknown to Smith, because remember, he has no clue where Brown is, the place mentioned in Proposition C happens to be really where Brown is at. So Brown really went to Barcelona, Spain. He really went there, but that's completely unknown to Smith. Okay, now what does that mean? The result is that Proposition C, remember that's there at the bottom, either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona, is true. Why? Because an or statement, unlike an and statement that requires both parts of the and statement to be true for the whole statement to be true, an or statement can be true if either part of the or statement is true. So even though in C it's false that Jones owns a Ford, the first part of the or statement is false, the second part of the or statement is true. Namely, it's actually true that Brown is in Barcelona, and therefore that whole or statement is true. So Proposition C is true, though Proposition A, from which it was derived, is false. Okay, so it's false that Jones owns a Ford. And the result is, once again, we have a justified true belief but no knowledge. Why? Because C is true, as we just said. 2, Smith believes that C is true. And then 3, Smith is justified in believing that C is true. He has good evidence for C, namely that Jones owns a Ford, even though it's false. But he got a lot of good evidence for it and then inferred this Proposition C from of the proposition that he had good evidence for, and therefore he has good evidence for that further proposition that he reliably inferred from the first one. But here's the result. Smith doesn't know that C is true. So those are the 2 cases from Edmund Gettier's famous paper that show, that demolished the standard account, the justified true belief account of knowledge. I hope that was helpful and really clarified and helped you better understand an important paper in the history of philosophy and epistemology. And as always, keep living the philosophical life, and we'll see you next time.